are back on another Wednesday night, getting to hang out, and we have a special guest this week, which is going to be so much fun. We have Kim Wilson with us. We'll get to her. We're going to talk about our normal books, catch up on what we've been reading. We have a garden theme tonight, Jane Austen, of course, as well. And we were sort of on theme without realizing that we were planning. So we were feeling bright and colorful. We want spring to be here in florals as well for the night. So welcome. My name is Melissa McCarowitz. I am the community manager for the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation. Welcome. If this is your first time joining us, don't forget to let us know where you're joining from in the comment section. We love to see where everybody is joining in with us at. And I feel like we've got more people on the screen than normal. So Marigold, I will go the low Brady Bunch, throw it down to you, and you can let us know what you've been up to, if you've found any new books at the library, and what you have been reading.
All right, well, I'm Marigold Webb, and I have a slew of things. I just finished The Book Eaters that I had mentioned last week, which was the surprise I didn't expect. It actually is about people who eat books, and also people's parts of their brains to take on the knowledge. So it was very interesting, not what I expected, but it was very interesting. I also just finished The In-Between Bookstore by Edward Underhill, which was about a trans boy, and it was, again, I hadn't read the introduction or anything, so it was a surprise, and it was very interesting how this bookstore kind of like brought him back to the past. So it was very, very interesting. And I just started The Remarkable Creatures by Tracy Chevalier, which was that's it. That from Melissa, who had recommended it today. I was like, oh, well, I just finished one. I'm going to start a new one. So that's what and then I'm soon going to be starting the Miss Austen for our book club. So it's been a busy week already.
That was fast. I literally just texted you that recommendation this morning, and you're already reading it. So I am impressed. And again, that's what I love about our community and our group, is that we are always sharing what we love with each other, and our stack gets bigger, but we're reading more books and we're finding new things, which is amazing. And Kim, I will catch you up that Marigold does not read the blurbs of books. She just goes in blindly, which I find terrifying. So The Book Eaters was her wild pick that she found, and you will have to give us a longer description of that later, because it sounds a bit wild and crazy. Mindy, I will throw it over to you, and let's see what you've been reading this week.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Mindy Kilgrove Harris, and today was a big book day for me because I was able to finish 2 books because I read, on my own, but I also read with my family. So this morning I finished Emily Henry's Book Lovers, which was recommended by the girls here, and they loved it, and I loved it hard. I was very into this one, to the point where by the time I got to the end, I was just, I really felt that the main characters were so well developed, and I loved everything about them. I have lots and lots of good things to say about Book Lovers. And then the other book I finished today was with my eldest son. We were reading Rick Riordan's newest entry in the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series, The Wrath of the Triple Goddess. So we just finished that about an hour ago. And that was very exciting for us because we're big Percy Jackson fans, but also we didn't love the first book in the newest series. So it's rare that the second book is so redeeming, but it was really good. So it gave me some more confidence to keep going with this series.
I love it. It's pretty good for you. Last week you were tooling around town, driving and doing all the audiobooks. So this week was a little bit different for you.
Yeah.
Congratulations, 2 in one day. That's a pretty good feat for a reader.
Makes me feel like a champion.
You are. And then we have our guest that we are absolutely delighted to have. Kim Wilson is with us tonight. Yay for Kim. Your books all have a special place on my shelf, and I absolutely love them. So I will let you go ahead, if you're comfortable, to introduce yourself to us. Tell us a little bit about your books, and if you want to share what you've been reading, but I know you've also been busy as well, so we won't put you on the spot if you haven't been in the middle of the book.
Oh, thanks. Oh, thanks for inviting me. I'm so pleased with the Literacy Foundation and what you're doing. I mean, it's just so wonderful. Yes, I wrote Tea with Jane Austen, In the Garden with Jane Austen, and At Home with Jane Austen. And we were just discussing, I think they all just went out of print this last year. So, but I'm working on Entertaining Mr. Darcy, so which will be like parties and things you can give, culminating in a grand dinner for Mr. Darcy, like the Bennets give. So it's an excuse to play with butter and sugar and calories. Yeah. So, and I'm reading in the sense I'm actually not reading anything except for Jane Austen. I've been so busy getting workshops ready. I'm doing I did a bead workshop and I taught at the Jane Austen Fest in Florida recently. And I'm worked up a workshop that I'm doing for the Jane Austen annual general meeting. And so I've been listening to Jane Austen, and I have newly discovered Juliet Stevenson as a narrator. Yeah. She was Mrs. Elton in the Gwyneth Paltrow Emma. And she's wonderful. It's just perfect. So I'm just running around doing things and listening and just laughing to myself. You know, so.
I've heard her narrations. They are very good. She does a great job. There's just certain voices that really work for Austen and her characters. And it's fun when you find them. So great. Well, I can't wait to see parties and butter. Sounds like a great combination to me. I am all in. And I've been reading Miss Austen. I've been starting on that. And very excited that we're going to be discussing that coming up the first week of, this is March, right? So April, the first weekend, first Saturday of each month, we'll be wrapping up our book club for the month before. Will be our new schedule. So if you are in the Patreon community, you will get your notifications about that. And I also just started a Formula One race contemporary romance, which it was sent to me. I know nothing about race cars. I read the other one, which was NASCAR before, and now I've got Formula One. So I guess I'm in my racing era, feeling the need for speed. And I just started that one, so we will see how it goes. But tonight I am going to hand it over to Mindy to start the conversation. She has been in charge of getting this whole thing together for us this week. I'm very excited to see what you have, and as always, for your amazing slides to take us through. So Mindy, it is over to you.
Okay. Well, gardening and flowers kind of have a special place in my heart. I'm not sure if I've ever said this on here before, but my grandmother, Isella, she ran a florist shop her whole life. And so, I mean, I think she had the flower shop for 60 or 65 years. So I really do love flowers, but I'm certainly not the expert on them. And that is why we have the author Kim Wilson here with us this evening, which is such a pleasure to have someone who can talk knowledgeably about things that we see outside and can appreciate. So thank you again, Kim, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's kind of you to describe me as an expert.
Something we kind of started, I think it was last week, right, girls? Last week. So what was happening in Jane Austen's life on a day like today? And in 1817, Jane Austen wrote to her niece Caroline to share some outstanding news. She received nearly £20 for the second edition of Sense and Sensibility.
Love it. That's so much fun to see each week.
Yes. You know, I went to a group talk a couple of weeks ago just to comment on the £20 and how much that would have been for the publication. And the person giving the talk at that time, she said nobody really ever thinks about how much money Austen received while she was alive for her works. But by the time she passed, if it would have been translated to today, it would have been almost it was like $1.5 million that she would have received, which was quite a bit of money. I don't think I usually don't think of it that way. I think of most of her work being published after she was deceased. So I thought that was interesting. Anyway, I digress. So I wanted to start out by talking about the garden and how it, especially in the Regency time, it was a reflection of the social circle, because the ladies of the house would share with one another, right? They would share with their neighbors. And I was hoping, Kim, maybe you could talk a little bit more about what kinds of things the ladies might have shared or how that would have been done.
Well, I've come to the same conclusion. I've always assumed it was just casual, like You think of in Mansfield Park, Mrs. Norris kind of snapples a little heath from the gardener, and so these the big landowners were great collectors of plants. There was sort of a see who would have the best, newest imported plants, and of course you can't just keep that in your garden. Everyone is taking little slips and cuttings and sharing seeds, and you know how it is. You visit someone's garden and you're just like, let me just snip off this little seed pod here. So I think of Mrs. Norris, there's an example. Jane Austen writes about that her brother Edward, who was wealthy and owned a couple of big estates, that they received seed from, and I assume slips of plants, but probably seeds from that estate, Gomersham. So, for example, she writes about the Austen women trying to grow mignonette, which was a fragrant, kind of an unassuming little flower, but really fragrant, really popular in cities and next to outhouses. And she talks about they got seed, they gave it to their friend Miss Ben in the village, and nobody could get it to grow. So we were talking about that. I occasionally with my friends, we do like a mignonette challenge. We don't have good luck either. But they would trade. I noticed, for example, Austen talks about eating tomatoes, as she called them. And I assume that they came from Gomersham. So if things, traded back and forth, I think it's just like today. You're visiting someone, and it's astonishing to me how quickly the plants spread once they came in, from the great age of exploration and colonialism, that they were in the sample gardens, the rich people's gardens, and then they're very quickly dispersed.
I'm going to see if I can do some quick tech management. Are you guys getting a reverb when you're hearing Kim talk?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Oh.
I'm going to try to see if we take you off the screen and bring you back on, if it'll maybe do a little, it's just giving us a little bit of garbled sound, and it didn't start until you just started giving your answer. So I'll pop you off, and then we'll pop you back on, and we'll see if we can fix that there. I was hoping it was only me hearing it. We'll see.
I could try my earbuds and change the mic.
Why don't we give that a try, and we'll see if that'll help. But I know my mom always does the same thing when I go to visit. She's like, "Oh, I got basil. Do you want some clippings of this or these different herbs?" And it's like fun that some of these plants regenerate so quickly that we can like pass them on to friends. I'm sure it was much more common than with people sharing, because they were using them a bit more than us running to the grocery store for them.
I think I've only ever shared that one time. So I think for me, it's very interesting to think that that was kind of how not only you were growing your garden, but you're growing your community, maybe making friends by going next door with some seeds.
That's a great point too. I'm sure certain people are experts as well in different areas. Go ahead, Kim.
Oh, I just wondered if that was better.
It's still crackling in the back. I don't know why, because we were perfectly fine until we started. Do you want to maybe just try closing out and then see if it picks up your AirPods and then come back in, and we'll just chat for a quick second until you rejoin us?
It is on my earbuds, but I will leave and come back in.
Okay. Marigold, do you have a green thumb, or are you a plant lover? Is there anything hidden around your house?
Well, as I mentioned you guys in our chat, I am half Italian, so that's what we grew up doing. Tomato, basil, switching with families. My sister does peppers on her patio, because I like doing the tomatoes on our deck in big pots. I'm not one that likes to live refuge on the ground. So I love that they're all right my height, and I can take care of them when I'm on my deck, like off the deck when they're up high. So it also keeps them from a lot of the squirrels and chipmunks and anyone who wants to steal my tomatoes.
I wonder, they must have been really good at knowing. I know, like, there's certain flowers that keep them away. I think, is it marigolds that the rabbits don't like, if I remember correctly?
Yes, and catnip actually keeps mosquitoes and a lot of bugs. So if you put a catnip plant on your deck, a lot of the mosquitoes and bugs will stay away from your deck area.
I'm sure they probably knew so much better than we do what exactly would help keep things away and protect them from all the pesky critters that we're trying to eat through the gardens.
Absolutely. They just seem to know all those secrets.
Let's give it a try, and we will keep our fingers crossed, Kim, that we're good now.
Okay. I told it to use this mic and to stop the echo. Does it sound better?
So far, so good.
Okay, excellent.
This is kind of a transition here, but I feel like when Bridgerton became popular, a lot of people, whether they'd read the books or they had watched the series, there's a couple of scenes devoted to when people are courting. Gentlemen often brought ladies flowers as a way to show their affections. So I was kind of curious, and Kim, maybe you know, what would have been something that would have been a popular flower to be given to show an interest?
Oh, okay. You may have exceeded my knowledge there. I researched this briefly when I was writing my books and seeing, who wore what when, what kind of flowers they'd wear, either fake or real when they went to balls. But the Victorians are the ones who really codified the language of flowers, but it was rising in interest in this period. So generally thought that Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, who was traveling in the Middle East, went to Turkey anyway, it was popular there as a code. And she brought it back, and you started to see books and things in France, translations of, I think it was the language, I wrote it down, a salam was what it was called, this coded language for ladies that were otherwise virtuous, to communicate. And so it seems to be almost different symbolism than in the Victorian period, but you start to see it really, really rising. So in terms of Bridgerton, I don't know. Of course, we're all it's a fantasy at that point anyway, right? You do see Byron and Cooper, one of Austen's favorite poets, using flowers in symbolic ways. So she talks about, Cooper talks about syringa, ivory pure. It's just the white, the mock orange, not lilac. We were talking about that. Rose is a symbol of love. I did look up because I had forgotten. So we see some things like lilies of the valley seem to be the same as Victorians. Virtue, chastity, daisy is innocence. Some of these things continue, I think. But as far as what they did in Bridgerton, I think we just have fun with that, right?
Yeah. Well, in Bridgerton, the big thing was tulips. That was a deal where the gentleman had to find the tulips. So I just wondered if that.
As far as I'm aware, that's made up. But
okay.
On the other hand, we have Catherine Morland learning to love a hyacinth in Northanger Abbey. So maybe that's the start of it. Bulb flowers.
Okay.
Would they have had hothouse flowers then? Would they have been going to pick them from the gardens? Where were they getting the flowers, even though they were early in their romanticism?
Yes. Well, I mean, people decorated with flowers heavily. They wore them in their hair. They had them at their parties. If you had an estate, you could grow them. But in the cities, it was really widely available. The West End area, the Kensington area now was just covered with market gardeners and flower gardeners. And so you could buy almost anything pretty much all year long. And they had hot houses, greenhouses. But if you were in the country, you'd grow your own. If you're in the city, you'd go to Covent Garden. Had a big flower market.
Not to get too technical, but do you know, were they crossbreeding? Was there any new, like, this is the popular flower that came about in the Regency era, the Georgian era? Were we seeing any new play around with that sort of?
It was a very popular thing that even Kew Gardens and gentlemen or women would take an interest in breeding their plants, or whole books devoted to this. But that reminds me of a wonderful quote I saw, and I wish I could remember the modern gardener who said it. But he said that most of what we think of as traditional English cottage garden flowers were actually, a lot of them were American. And so they would collect them here, say in the early 1700s, the 17th century maybe, bring them to England. And he said they went to England for an education, that they would crossbreed them and hybridize them. And suddenly they've got all these, 26 varieties of a phlox that was American, say. And then now we have them back. And I actually had that phenomenon. I was that experience at Chawton Cottage Garden. I saw a plant that I then saw in my garden in the wild form, which now, of course, the name escapes me. Garden, meadow rue, I think, yes. And I didn't recognize it because it was 6 feet tall and green. And in England, it's about this high and pink. So definitely hybridized over the couple of 100 years since they got it.
The amount of patience to wait to see the product of your fruits of your labor from crossbreeding things is just amazing.
Before we move on, sorry, from the courting slide, I just wanted to throw a fun question out there for all of us. If someone is bringing you flowers, it doesn't matter whoever brings you flowers, or maybe if you buy them for yourself, what flowers do you buy, or what flowers do you hope to get?
Marigold. You have the flower name. What are you going with?
Well, don't bring me marigolds. We have those in our garden. I don't know. I love the big like peonies, but if it's being something for special, I would say calla lilies because those are just beautiful.
Good choices.
Or an orchid.
I love orchids. Girl.
Sorry.
What about you, Melissa? What do you like?
I'm lilacs. I love the smell, or lilacs, however you say it from where you're at. We grew up with a huge bush right at our neighbor's yard, and I just love the smell of them. That makes me happy.
And Kim, what about you?
I actually am oddly partial to the miniature carnation because they last so long and they come in like fun colors. Like I always get disappointed. I get roses and then sometimes they are not taken care of properly and they immediately droop over, and it just seems such a wanton waste. And so I love like, or alstroemeria, something that I'm going to get a couple of weeks out of it if I'm really careful.
You want bang for your buck with your flowers.
Yeah. The daffodils, I can't have enough of those in the spring. So,
How about you, Mindy?
I love getting flowers. I love when my husband brings home flowers. I always, I get so excited. I get kind of giddy about it. But especially here in Florida, I'm not sure if this is true everywhere, but a lot of the flowers that are sold locally, they spray fun, vibrant colors. So my favorites are when he brings home the daisies that have been done up in an aqua blue and a tangerine orange, it's all these that are certainly not natural, but I just love looking at them. So
love that.
Moving along to doing some healing. We all know, and maybe we even know people who still use herbal remedies. But it seems about this time with 1814 Culpeper's complete herbal book that maybe they were developing some uses for plants. Kim, can you speak to any of the using plants as healing ideas?
Yeah, my impression is that it actually decreased in private use over time. So when you were your only physician and it was things that only what you could grow in your garden, I think that herbals like Elizabeth Blackwell, we see at the Jane Austen's brothers at Chawton House, they've reproduced a herb garden. It was very important to be able to make these remedies, these herbal remedies, and with the increasing professionalization of the medical field, you start to see that dying off. But you still see in Jane Austen's time, they would buy a lot of these things. It would still be using herbal medicine. Jane Austen talks about her mother having dandelion tea, and she does it for her digestive issues. And she doesn't mean dandelion leaves, she means the root, which is still prescribed by herbalists today. Or rhubarb. She talks about giving rhubarb to the cook. Again, rhubarb root. But you would buy it. And so I think a lot of Regency women by this time were making more things like rose water, lavender water, like we see in Mansfield Park with roses. That's what Mrs. Norris wants the roses for, so she can turn them into things and sachets. But you still see recipes, like for Hungary water or how to dye your hair, like a flaxen color, which basically involved making your own lye and bleaching it and then doing like a chamomile wash. I can't recommend that. Certain things, like I had a recipe that was how to thicken like bald part on your to cover over an area, but that was also still like lye. I don't know what that's doing. So, but yeah, to me, it seems like it's tapering off and becoming just more for enjoyment. Those sorts of preparations.
Do any of you use an herbal treatment or I guess a plant-based treatment for anything currently?
I grew up in the house where there's an aloe plant that was always being split off into more aloe, and it was like, you gotta burn, put aloe on it. You gotta cut, put aloe on it. Everything was cured by aloe.
Yeah.
We had a similar. We had the same in aloe. I also, if we had upset stomach, we had bay leaf tea. Like you just take bay leaf and you put it in hot water and drink it. And I don't know how. Maybe it was just psychology, but it works. It's worked my whole life. And even now, I'll do it if I have an upset stomach. Or ginger. I love ginger. So anytime I'm not feeling good, I have ginger tea or something like with ginger in it. It's just amazing how it makes you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and essential oils that are also popular now. That's the same exact thing. And now we have proof. Often they'll do studies. Yes, lavender is calming. So when Marianne Dashwood, when Eleanor bathes her temples in lavender water, right? Or mint, we know that focuses the mind. I mean, so these things are actually, there's some basis for a lot of it.
Yeah. I worked with someone that actually used to put peppermint oil on their temples to help with headaches.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Well, lavender water is for certainly, and they made Hungary water, which actually I made a note. So it's rosemary, pennyroyal, marjoram, brandy, but you're bathing yourself with it, and then you distill it, and then that would help. The authentic Hungary water. So sometimes ladies had little stills and they did their own things, but again, for actual medicine, I got the impression they were buying.
I know we kind of talked about using a hothouse before, but how popular was it for private owners to have an orangery or a hothouse where they would grow pineapples? Was that something that happened?
Pineapples is subject dear to my heart. I could go on. Yes, it depends on how wealthy you were. Often, almost anybody. I'm getting some feedback here. Do you hear that as well?
A little, but it's not as bad as it was before. Well, yeah, I think we'll be okay.
Hope it's not me. Almost anyone with any sort of little manor house or pretensions to gentility might have a little greenhouse, right? And a greenhouse is just glassed in and provides you some protection. But a hothouse, you often had to be fairly wealthy to have, because think about it, you have to have the wood, the land that has the wood, people to cut it, dry it, stack it, stoke the fires. It's an elaborate system. They're heated with flues, often under the floor or in the walls. And certain things like your orange trees, maybe you could get by with a greenhouse. Certainly, people would often have grapes, like the grapes that are served when Elizabeth visits with the gardeners at Pemberley. I went to a lot of effort to figure out what grapes were in season in that month in England, and they probably were at least greenhouse, maybe hothouse. But pineapples, for sure, you needed a hothouse. And it was an elaborate process. Sanditon is the TV series is a little off. They're trying to show how exotic and expensive it was, but that would have been more appropriate, say, in the 1740s. Okay. Lady Denham would have had pineapple, but it was expensive. I mean, they sold, when General Tilney brags about his pinery and only having 100 pines. That's what he means, by the way, is pineapples, not pine trees. He's bragging, of course. He's bragging. It's General Tilney, right? But each pineapple would sell for like a pound or a guinea, so maybe $100. So not as rare as we see in Sanditon, but pretty darn expensive. People rented them, and then in your hothouse to grow them, it was like a succession of peat beds, and so and then they were subject to diseases and spider mites and things like that, and so it's a massively expensive process, and of course they couldn't import them easily because they would rot on the ships.
Mhm.
And it wasn't till really steamships, and and then increased gardening methods and steam heat and that kind of thing in the Victorian era. They could grow some in England more. Then they started to see the price come down. So, anyway, don't get me started. Pineapples, we could go all day.
Well, Kim, you've done such a wonderful job of telling us and reminding us of some of the plants and flowers, of course, that are mentioned throughout Jane Austen's books, but a few of them, um, strawberries in Emma, and the hyacinth, I think you mentioned that, in Northanger Abbey, and then geraniums in Mansfield Park. So, do you think, I mean, because you have researched these items, was there any reason Jane Austen might have included these? Did she have a special love for strawberries, or would it have just been for that region what was available, and so it made sense? What do you think?
Well, I get the impression that her sister Cassandra was more the gardener, but she does write back and forth to her and talks about actually Cassandra's love for strawberries, that Jane was eating them, and then if Cassandra had been home, she would have snabbled them, Um, it's interesting. Every single time you run across the mention of a plant in the books, there's something beyond it. Like they're discussing in that scene in Emma, all the different varieties of strawberries you could buy at the time or grow probably. And of course, they're seasonal. You're not going to be going to Costco and buying strawberries from Costa Rica or something. It's just going to come in that early period. Um, I note that Jane Austen uses a love of nature as a character signifier. That if you look at the characters who love nature, we love those characters, and the characters that we love to hate do not. And this is consistent. Although you do have Mr. Collins who loves to work in his garden. But,
That's true.
So we can have a love-hate relationship with Mr. Collins, I guess.
Thinking about the strawberry picking in Emma, that is a group activity that they go out and do. And, it's portrayed one way in the book, and then in all of the different modern film interpretations, they kind of manipulate it again to show something about the characters. But would it have been a normal activity for people of that class to go spend the afternoon strawberry picking?
Well, parties of pleasure, or as they call them, we see this in Sense and Sensibility, where they're going to set up and go, or Emma, they go on a picnic, right? Strawberry picnic and a picnic. Yes, I have seen that, but it's very much Mrs. Elton's idea that you drift along in a pretty sun hat and a little basket, and probably realistically, it's like rich people's gardening at the time that you wander through, or Lady Bertram, you send Fanny to cut the roses, right? Oh, such a labor it's been, as you pluck one rose and give it to the gardener to carry for you. But yes, these outdoor parties of pleasure, getting back to nature, you do see that.
Okay. And this is just something I came across, these botanical dialogues. Apparently they were written around Jane Austen's time by Maria Jackson. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. But they were for children and included beautiful illustrations, and they were trying to explain, the way that we classify plants. Is this something, that you're familiar with, or did I research the wrong way and find something that doesn't make sense?
No, it was, I had run across it. I didn't spend a lot of time on it before, but it was well received. She was very well respected. I think it might be Jackson as well, because I sometimes see it spelled CK.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't have, I looked it up because I knew you wanted to talk about it, and it didn't have a second edition. And I think it was a little advanced for children. She sets it up as this dialogue between a mother and her children, but it reminds me of perhaps very accomplished young children. You think of the Miss Bertrams learning the principal rivers of Europe or something. And it's like, it didn't feel very child friendly, but it was very well done. It was very well received. This is kind of the rise of the classification or the codification of the Linnaean system. So she was well thought of. She wrote some more books, but I don't think I would have found it useful as a child.
She was maybe a little. She was a little early for her time. She needed to be in the Victorian era where they were like all about the plants and flowers. Maybe she would have done a little better in her publishing career.
Well, and I have seen some things written for children where they're very, very simply written. And I think she just wanted to get all of her knowledge in there. So it's a lovely book, but can't imagine it that useful. Maybe for teenagers. Maybe that's what she was thinking.
So on the slides here, we have some tips that they might have used in the garden back then. But I was sort of wondering if you had any tips for us, modern day gardeners, anything that you could recommend for someone maybe who's just starting, just a novice.
Right. Okay. Well, this is where I take refuge in saying that I'm a garden enthusiast as opposed to an expert. It's like, don't look at my garden, depending on the year, right, or what else I'm working on. My favorite thing is starting small, because that's how I have to do it. I just take an area and I have this one little square area that I've made into a parterre, a divided garden, and I grow sometimes patterns of flowers, sometimes just patterns of lettuce, because that's kind of fun. But it's a copy of A Square Garden by John Claudius Loudon, who was a famous gardener, but it literally would have been like an entire quarter acre, and the paths were recommended to be wide enough for 3, like in Pride and Prejudice. Elizabeth says, "I won't spoil the picturesque by walking with Elizabeth and the Miss Bingley, the Bingley sisters." And mine is literally just wide enough to put my feet on, so just depending on the size of your garden. But yeah, start small, and I almost never start anything from seed because I never am that organized.
That's difficult.
So I go and get starts, or sometimes if it's like a nasturtium that won't do well when you pre-plant it, then yeah. I like your plant about wilderness. I mean, your point.
We have to throw that in there for Pride and Prejudice with the prettyish wilderness.
But be careful though, because the reason they thought of it as a wilderness, I mean, we always think as an American like it's Yosemite or Alaska or something, but the chief point of a wilderness in those days was that it looked sort of natural, and there were grass paths among the trees, and so that's about as much of a wilderness as the English could handle, right? It was dangerous because you might get your feet wet, and then like Marianne Dashwood, you get sick and it could kill you. So you definitely beware of English wildernesses.
I'll stay close to the house.
Here we just have some flowers from Chawton House because we are at the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation. Caroline Knight, she had the pleasure of living at Chawton House, so I found a couple of photos here of some various flowers and some trees as well. The fir trees apparently are abundant. But you were speaking about mignonettes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we can kind of view what they look like here.
And your peonies, Marigold, they're so pretty.
So pretty.
Well, and those are mentioned in Jane Austen's letter, talking about the flowers in the shrubbery that were blooming, the peonies and the sweet williams.
So pretty.
And I think I just liked this photograph. I thought that it would be something great to share because it's that entryway into the gardens. And I liked that there's the different pops of color in there. I'm not sure that I could point out any of the flowers that are mentioned. Kim, or can you take a look at any of those and say, oh yeah, that's this certain flower?
Well, maybe some poppies, some roses. This is the entrance to the walled, it used to be the kitchen garden at Jane Austen's brother's house, which was put in like the year after she died, but she knew he planned it. And what I love is how it's the old-fashioned mixture of flowers and vegetables. which
wow.
was popular in the earlier Regency time. And then the Victorians later, everything would have been, well, this is the walled kitchen gardens, you can do what you want. But they always hid the practical things, the vegetables. Whereas in Jane Austen's time, it would often be a mix.
Was there a reason that they did the mix, or just it was popular at the time?
I think it was just what people did. Lots of people did the cottage garden, and in fact, the tree cottage garden, you'll see manuals. Again, John Loudon talking about all the different things you could do to mix herbs and useful fruits, and yet some pretty things too for a cottager. And then regular people did it, but then by the Victorian times, they were talking that's old-fashioned. So. I think it's all of a piece, like her nephew writes about this and how the Austen garden was old fashioned. And then they talk about their aunts being kind of old fashioned, doing some of the work themselves. So the Victorians got gradually more stuffy and more formal. I mean, I like some other things like their tea. Their tea was much more interesting than the Regency tea. But
I feel like there's a lesson to be had there and mix a little bit of the practical and a little bit of the beautiful. Like that was a good juxtaposition that they had going on.
I think so.
Here is a video from Chawton House, and I know we're sort of running out of time, so I think we'll just tell our viewers, right?
Yeah, we'll watch it next week together with everybody if you want to give them a...
Okay. And as Melissa mentioned at the top of the live stream today is March 12th, 2025, and it is National Plant a Flower Day. Sorry to say, but I will not be observing this holiday. I don't have any, I'm not sure if you can see it now, but I have a pool behind me. That's my yard as I get a pool. So I don't have room to plant flowers in the ground per se, but do any of you have flowers that you regularly plant, or maybe you're being inspired to plant this holiday season?
Well, we just got rid of the snow here in Wisconsin, so I've got some snowdrops coming up, little tips of daffodils. Not going to plant anything. Well, the frost is still in the ground, so.
I find it interesting that it's March 12th is plant a flower. Right. So it has to be a seedling or something that is getting ready to go in the ground, but we haven't planted anything yet. So hopefully with this weather turning, it'll stay warm and melt the ground.
And you mentioned earlier that you have tomatoes in a pot, Marigold. When do you have to plant those? When does that happen?
I never remember. It's during the summer. We look for the ones that are always small in the plant, and we put them in larger plants to encourage their growth. And we put them on our deck, so we have more of the San Gimignano tomatoes, which are kind of like the little oblong ones, are great for sauce. And then we do a lot of cherry tomatoes. I'm trying to remember all the varieties that we get, but we do a few different varieties so we can use them for different things. We like big sauce and bruschetta and all these tomatoes.
So you're in good company, because we know Jane Austen loved tomatoes. She talked about that. She said her niece and when she wrote to Cassandra, she said, Fanny and I regale upon them every day. So
that's what I feel like in the summer. Tomatoes every day.
Melissa, are you planting a flower today, or did you, I guess, earlier?
Ohio is not welcoming to flowers right now. And I don't normally do flowers. I normally stick with the things that we cook with. So I'll do basil, mint, spearmint, thyme, like all of your traditional kind of things. I've learned my lesson. Those are pretty hardy. They don't die too easily, and I really I love the idea of the kitchen garden and just kind of being able to go out and pull a few things. I love making tea in the summer and throwing some mint leaves in there, and that's my playfulness with it. No, I will buy the pretty flowers like you do with the sprayed orange and the blue at the store.
And of course, we're on to our March book club selection. I know we are all so excited for Jill Hornby's Miss Austen, whether it's the first time reading it or it's the 12th time. I know we're all really excited to talk about this novel. But as you can see on this cover, and Melissa's found a great cover that has a female character on the front, but this one has the lilac. So, Kim, can you think of any, again, we're back to that language of flowers idea, but do we know what the lilac symbolizes or why it might be here on this novel?
I can only think that there's the one quote where Jane Austen writes from London and talks about lilacs and how Cassandra had been telling her that at Chawton they were in leaf, but in London they were in bloom, and that how everything at Kensington Gardens where she was walking was fresh and beautiful. So there's that association. Sometimes people, get confused, as we were saying. They think that syringa that she refers to was lilac, because that's what we call it now, and talk about, the Latin names. But I don't think that. Maybe it's just because it's pretty and Jane Austen mentions them.
They're both really pretty covers for this book, but I am partial to this one. It just looks really calming of a cover and so pretty with the Miss Austen. Well, thank you, Mindy, so much for hosting us tonight and running the club. And thank you, Kim. I always learn something. I never leave a talk without you hosting and chatting about all the knowledge you have about gardening and all the little tidbits about the things that Austen was doing and her domestic life and at home. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It was really a lot of fun.
Of course. And as Mindy said, we're really looking forward to talking about this book. And then we will have some plans coming up for a watch party when it releases for us on PBS here in, what did we say, May? I think it's the first episode is going to be coming out. So it's a great chance to chat about the book. And then we can also chat about the show when that releases as well. So thank you to everyone who joined us live. And if you're joining us afterwards, feel free to also drop your thoughts in the comments section as well. And as always, we will see you next Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time to chat about an upcoming topic we'll release. I can't remember off the top of my head what we're talking about. But it will be
Poetry.
Oh, poetry next week. That's right. We're going to be chatting about some poetry. That should be a lot of fun. So everyone have a good whatever time of the day it is for you. And we will see you next week. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.